My wife's lover's wife and I exposed them, and what happened next shocked everyone. I've photographed war zones, disasters, and human suffering across 43 countries. I thought I had seen it all, until I saw that message. It was late at night, and I was packing for what was supposed to be my final international assignment before semi-retirement. A retrospective on refugee communities, a project close to my heart. My flight was in a few hours, and I was going through my checklist when her laptop caught my eye. It was open, email inbox still logged in. I wasn't snooping. I was just moving it to the nightstand when I saw the message preview. Can't wait for tomorrow. Meet at the usual place. He'll be gone for 2 weeks. My hands froze. My breathing stopped. The sender's name made my vision blur. I clicked. 2 whole weeks without worrying about him coming home early. I've booked our room at the Harbor View. Pack that red thing I like. I want to spend hours taking it off you. The blood in my veins turned to ice. The timestamps on their conversations stretched back for months. Late-night messages, private jokes at my expense, hotel meetups. It wasn't a one-time mistake. This was calculated. Planned. A sound snapped me back to reality, her keys in the front door. She was home. I barely had time to close the laptop and continue folding my clothes when she walked in. She smiled, kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong, and asked if I was ready for my flight. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I had trusted, the person I had built a life with. She was wearing a new blouse. For me? Or for him? Just about, I said, forcing a smile, zipping up my camera bag. My mind was a battlefield. Anger, betrayal, confusion, but I kept my voice steady. I need to swing by the office before heading to the airport. Mind if I leave early? She didn't even hesitate. If anything, she looked relieved. Of course not, she said. I have some papers to grade anyway. Another lie. I kissed her goodbye for what I knew would be the last time. And I walked out of our home, knowing nothing would ever be the same. But I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. First, I needed a plan. And I knew exactly where to start. I sat in my car outside our house, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The message kept replaying in my mind, each word cutting deeper. This wasn't just a moment of weakness or some fleeting mistake. It was deliberate, premeditated, and filled with excitement at my absence. I was nothing more than an obstacle, a minor inconvenience in their carefully arranged plans. My flight to Jordan was in a few hours, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't getting on that plane. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed justice. If they had been so meticulous in hiding their affair, I would be just as meticulous in exposing it. My entire career had been built on capturing truth through my lens, and now that skill was about to become my weapon. But I couldn't do this alone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. The other victim in this betrayal. The person who unknowingly shared my fate. When she answered, her voice was crisp and professional, as if she were picking up a call for work, not for something that would change her life. "This is Hazel Holloway," she said. I took a steadying breath. "Mrs. Holloway, my name is Preston Foster. I'm calling about your husband." There was a pause, slight but noticeable. "I see," she said carefully. "What about him? I'd rather discuss this in person. It concerns my wife as well." Another pause. Then, with a quiet, knowing sigh, she said, "There's a coffee shop on Commonwealth Avenue. Blackbird. I can be there in 30 minutes. I had expected shock. Maybe denial. But not calm acceptance. It made me wonder if she had already suspected something but, like me, had been too blind or too trusting to see it. The Blackbird was nearly empty when I arrived. 10 minutes later, she walked in. Tall, elegant, and composed in a way that suggested she was used to controlling situations. She looked like someone who had spent years in high-stakes environments, navigating power and deception. She sat down across from me, placed her hands on the table and said, "Show me." I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshots and slid it toward her. She didn't react immediately. No gasp, no tears. She simply picked it up and started scrolling, her expression unreadable. But I noticed the way her fingers tightened around the device. the way her breathing slowed. When she finally set it down, she removed her glasses and rubbed her temples. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Found out this morning." She nodded, as if that confirmed something she had already suspected. "And you're telling me this because you deserve to know," I said. "And because I want to make sure they don't get away with it." She studied me for a long moment. Then, in a tone so measured it sent a chill down my spine, she said, "They think they're smarter than us. Let's prove them wrong." She checked her watch and stood up. "I need to go," she said, "but we should continue this conversation tonight." "I have a flight to Jordan in a few hours," I said. She gave me a small, knowing smile. "Not anymore." She pulled a business card from her bag and wrote something on the back. "Meet me at this address at 8. We have planning to do." Then she walked away, leaving me alone with my rage and the cold realization that my entire life had just been rewritten. That night, I arrived at the address Hazel had given me. It was an upscale hotel bar in Back Bay, a place where people came for business, for affairs, for secrets. A perfect setting for what we were about to do. Hazel was already seated in the corner, a martini in front of her. She looked up as I approached, nodding approvingly. "I took the liberty of ordering you a scotch," she said. I sat down, accepting the drink. "You've done your homework. Know your allies as well as your enemies," she said. "First rule of politics." She slid a folder across the table. "And speaking of enemies, here's what I've gathered about their affair." Inside were hotel receipts, restaurant bills, parking tickets, evidence spanning the past 6 months. "How did you get these?" I asked. "Edwin is a creature of habit," she said, sipping her drink. "Uses the same credit card for everything." I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the proof in my hands. "So what do we do with this?" "If we confront them, they'll just deny it," she said. "Make promises. Get sneakier." "Then what?" She leaned in, her voice lowering. "We catch them in the act. Publicly." I stared at her. "How?" "Tomorrow night," she said. "They're meeting at the Harbor View Hotel." I tensed. "And we just show up?" "Not quite. The university's alumni gala is happening in the same hotel ballroom. Every major donor, every faculty member, every person who matters to them professionally will be there." Realization dawned. "You want to expose them at the gala." She smiled. "Maximum impact. That seems cruel." "Wasn't it cruel when they decided to betray us?" she countered. "They humiliated us, Preston. They deserve the same." My phone buzzed. A text from my wife. "Miss you already. Have a safe flight." Hazel glanced at her own phone and smirked. My husband sent almost the exact same message. I looked up at her. "I'm in." "Good," she said, sliding a hotel key card across the table. I frowned. "What's this?" "I booked you a room here," she said. "Why?" "Because your wife is expecting you to call from Jordan tonight." She was right. I couldn't risk being seen anywhere else. I would have to fake my entire trip while she believed I was thousands of miles away. "I'll need to call my son," I said. "He'll worry if I don't check in." Hazel nodded. "Of course. Family first." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Family first. That had been our motto. My wife and I had built a life around it. But now those words felt hollow, stripped of their meaning. Hazel stood up to leave. I found myself asking, "How are you so calm about this?" She paused, her composed mask cracking for the first time. "Trust me," she said. "I'm screaming on the inside." After she left, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at the city lights. Tomorrow everything would change. The morning of the gala, I woke up in my hotel room to the dull hum of the city outside. The weight of what was about to happen pressed against me like a lead blanket. It wasn't nerves, at least not the kind that made me second-guess myself. It was something heavier, something colder. The kind of clarity that only comes when you know there's no turning back. I reached for my phone. Messages from my wife filled the screen. "Hope your flight was smooth. Miss you already. Did you get some rest? You always struggle with jet lag. Thinking of you. Can't wait for you to come home." Lies. Every word of it. She was probably texting me while getting ready for him. Maybe while packing the red dress he liked, the one she only ever wore for special occasions. I wondered if she was nervous. Did she feel guilty? Or was she so lost in the fantasy of it all that she truly believed she could keep both lives intact? It didn't matter. A new message came in. Hazel. Meet me at Huntington Taylor's in an hour. You need a tux. I stared at the message, exhaling slowly. I already owned a tux. Perfectly fine one. But I knew Hazel wouldn't take no for an answer. And in some strange way, I understood why she insisted. Tonight wasn't just about catching them. It was about taking control of the narrative before they could spin it themselves. By the time I arrived at the tailor shop, Hazel was already there, sipping an espresso as she spoke with one of the staff. She looked up as I entered, her eyes scanning me critically before nodding in approval. You clean up well, Foster, she said as the tailor adjusted my jacket. I still think my tux would have worked just fine. She arched a brow. And that's why I didn't ask for your opinion. I smirked despite everything. It was the first moment of levity I had felt since this nightmare began. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. We'll blend in better this way. Appearances matter. They're expecting to be invisible tonight, slipping into the background while the rest of the university schmoozes. But you. She adjusted the lapel of my jacket, tilting her head as if assessing a soldier before battle. You'll stand out just enough that they won't suspect a thing. I exhaled, nodding. And you, she smiled. Something red. Of course. A statement. A warning. By late afternoon, everything was in place. Hazel had secured us tickets, ensuring that no one would question our presence at the event. I spent the rest of the evening in my hotel room, pacing, double-checking my camera gear, and waiting. The minutes dragged, but the weight in my chest remained the same, unshakable, inevitable. At exactly 6:30, I met Hazel in the hotel lobby. She was waiting by the grand staircase, wearing a sleek, deep red dress that was both elegant and dangerous, the kind of color that demanded attention. She linked her arm through mine and smiled. Showtime. The gala was already in full swing when we arrived. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the room. Glasses clinked, conversations hummed in the background. Wealth, influence, and power mingled in every corner. It was the perfect place for two people like my wife and her lover to hide in plain sight. Hazel and I worked the room first, blending into the crowd, making polite conversation with donors and faculty members. No one questioned my presence. If anything, they were intrigued by Hazel's choice of company, assuming I was another political contact or a potential investor. 20 minutes in, I spotted them. She entered first. A midnight blue dress, hair styled in soft waves, eyes sparkling with excitement she hadn't shown around me in months. It hit me then, how long she had been gone. How I had lost her long before this night. He followed a few steps behind, entering from another side of the ballroom. They didn't come in together, but I saw the way his eyes locked onto her. The way she subtly adjusted her dress when she knew he was watching. I reached for my camera instinctively. My hand curled around the lens, but I didn't lift it just yet. Not yet. Let them get comfortable first, Hazel murmured beside me. We waited. They moved separately at first, greeting colleagues, making small talk. But every now and then, their glances met across the room. Small, secretive smiles. Unspoken understanding. The game they thought they were playing. I captured it all. The way his hand brushed the small of her back when they finally stood close enough. The way she leaned in when he whispered something in her ear. The way they both laughed, lost in their own little world. 20 minutes later, Hazel turned to me. Ready. I tightened my grip on my camera, my heart a steady drum in my chest. As I'll ever be. We moved toward them, closing the distance just as he leaned in to whisper something in her ear. She laughed, soft, intimate, a sound that once belonged to me. Cleared my throat. She turned. The moment she saw me, the color drained from her face. Surprise, I said. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I glanced at him, watching as his expression shifted from confusion to something much closer to panic. Hazel took a step forward, her voice light, almost amused. "Oh, darling," she said, looking at her husband. "Funny running into you here." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. A few nearby guests had turned to watch, sensing the tension. My wife tried to compose herself. "Why aren't you in Jordan?" I held up my camera. "Because I have about 100 photos that tell a very different story." Panic flickered across her face. "This isn't what it looks like." Hazel let out a soft laugh. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "It's exactly what it looks like." A murmur spread through the crowd. Whispers, stolen glances, the kind of energy that builds before a storm. She reached for my arm, voice desperate. "Please, we should talk about this privately." Pulled away. "Like you've been talking privately with him for the past 6 months?" Her lover finally found his voice, slipping into politician mode. "Everyone, let's calm down. This is clearly a misunderstanding." Hazel cut him off. "Is this a misunderstanding too?" She pulled out her phone, tapping the screen. "The hotel receipts? The dinner reservations? The months of messages." A sharp gasp came from someone in the crowd. My wife's hands trembled. "You had no right to go through my phone. And you had no right to throw away 26 years of marriage." I shot back. "But here we are." The university president approached, his expression grave. "Is everything all right here?" Hazel turned to him smoothly. "Actually, President Williams, we were just discussing some rather concerning ethical issues regarding faculty conduct." My wife paled. Her career, her reputation, everything she had built outside our marriage was crumbling before her eyes. She turned back to me, voice breaking. "Preston, please, think about our son." I met her gaze, my voice calm, steady. "I am." I turned and walked away, the weight of her betrayal lifting with each step. Hazel fell in beside me, her face unreadable. "You all right?" she asked. I exhaled, steadying myself. "I will be." The night wasn't over yet. But one thing was certain. They thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming next. I left the gala with Hazel beside me, the murmur of shocked voices fading behind us. The night air was cold, but I barely felt it. My mind was still reeling from everything that had just unfolded. The look on my wife's face when she realized she was caught. The way her lover had tried to scramble for control. His political instincts kicking in only to be crushed under Hazel's well-placed words. The whispers, the gasps, the weight of every betrayal unraveling under the bright lights of the ballroom. I had spent years documenting the downfall of corrupt leaders, war criminals, and entire governments. But I had never expected to be at the center of my own exposé. Hazel and I didn't speak until we were back in the hotel bar, seated in a secluded corner. She ordered 2 drinks without asking me first, and when the waiter placed them on the table, she raised her glass slightly. "To justice," she said. I picked up my drink but didn't immediately respond. Justice. That word had always meant something different to me. It had been about exposing the truth, giving a voice to the voiceless, making sure the world saw what others wanted to hide. But now it was personal. Now it was about reclaiming something that had been taken from me. Hazel studied me for a moment, then took a sip of her martini. "You did well in there," she said. I let out a dry chuckle. "Did I?" "You didn't let her manipulate you. You didn't let him twist the narrative. And most importantly, you didn't lose your temper." I exhaled, setting my glass down. "Maybe because I'm too numb to feel anything right now." She nodded knowingly. "It'll hit you later. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe a week from now. The anger. The grief. But right now, we did what we came to do." I ran a hand through my hair. "And what now?" Hazel leaned back in her seat, tilting her head slightly. "Now, they deal with the consequences." I knew she was right. My wife would wake up tomorrow to find her reputation in free fall. The university would have to launch an official ethics review. Her colleagues, many of whom had been in that ballroom, would never look at her the same way again. And as for her lover, His career in politics had likely just ended before it could truly begin. But for me, the fight wasn't over yet. My phone vibrated on the table. I glanced at the screen. A message from my wife. "Please, we need to talk." I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I stared at the words for a long moment before locking the screen and setting the phone face down. Hazel watched me, one brow raised. "She's going to try to spin it," she said. "She'll play the remorseful wife, the woman who made a mistake, but still loves you. She'll try to rewrite history to make herself the victim." I let out a slow breath. "And what would you do in my place?" Hazel swirled the last of her martini in the glass. "That depends. Do you want revenge? Or do you just want to be free?" That was the real question, wasn't it? There was a time, only a day ago, when I had wanted to destroy her the way she had destroyed me. But now, sitting here, watching Hazel sip her drink with the cool detachment of someone who had already burned their past to the ground, I realized something. I didn't need revenge. I needed closure. "I just want out," I said finally. Hazel smiled, a little softer this time. "Then let her destroy herself. She will, you know. Women like her always do." I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside. At some point, I must have drifted off because the next thing I knew, my phone was vibrating again. This time, it wasn't my wife. It was my son. I sat up, rubbing a hand over my face before answering. "Hey, buddy." His voice was hesitant. "Dad? Why didn't you tell me?" I felt my stomach tighten. "Tell you what?" "That you're being considered for the Parkinson Prize. Mom just told me. She said it's why you're in Jordan." My breath caught in my throat. The Parkinson Prize. One of the highest honors in photojournalism. I had been nominated once, years ago, but I hadn't even known I was in consideration this year. Because I wasn't. My wife had made it up. I forced my voice to stay calm. "She told you that?" "Yeah," he said, a little breathless. "She said it was supposed to be a secret, but she was so proud she had to tell me. She said you didn't want to jinx it." I squeezed my eyes shut. Another lie. But why? And then, like a puzzle clicking into place, I saw it. Hazel's voice from the night before echoed in my mind. She needs a narrative. If my wife was planning to leave me, she couldn't just walk away. She had to control the story. She had to paint me as the absent, career-obsessed husband who had neglected her while she suffered alone. The prize wasn't real, but the setup was. My hands clenched into fists. "Dad?" My son's voice cut through my thoughts. "Are you okay?" I forced myself to sound normal. "Yeah, buddy. Just surprised. Listen, I have to go, but I'll call you later. Okay?" "Sure. And, tell Mom congrats." I didn't answer before hanging up. The next call I made was to Hazel. She answered immediately. "Morning, Foster." She told my son I was in Jordan for the Parkinson Prize, I said without greeting. Hazel was silent for a beat. Then, with a quiet sigh, she said, "Of course she did. It's not true." "I know." I exhaled, pressing a hand against my temple. "She's setting me up, trying to rewrite the story so when she finally leaves, she gets to be the wronged wife instead of the woman who threw away her marriage for a cheap affair." Hazel's voice was calm. "Standard operating procedure. Edwin did the same to me. Told people I was having an emotional affair with a campaign manager. It wasn't true, but by the time I figured out what he was doing, the damage was done." I ran a hand through my hair. "So what do I do?" Hazel didn't hesitate. "Get ahead of it. File for divorce first. Control the story before she does." I nodded to myself, already feeling the weight of the decision settling into place. "You're right. I usually am." I let out a small laugh despite everything. "Thank you, Hazel." There was a pause. Then softer, "You don't have to thank me, Preston. We're in this together." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. And that changed everything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload.